Man, it's hard to believe it's been 7 months since I uploaded the first bad loadout video. In those 7 months, I've been able to accomplish so much on YouTube, it's really awesome. To put things into perspective, guess how many subscribers I had when I made that video? If you guessed 1,000, you would be wrong. Get out of my sight. I actually had a little over 200. All bragging aside, ever since I made that video, I've been getting requests to make a new one, and you all have been giving me many suggestions for your own worst loadouts. So I guess it's time to set the record straight on TF2's worst loadout. And to you newcomers who haven't seen the first video, don't worry, it's not essential viewing. However, if you do want to watch it, I'll put this silly little button in the corner for you to click on. Today, it is my goal to find TF2's worst combination of weapons. I mean, out of 160 plus unique weapons in the game, a few are going to go together as well as pineapple and spaghetti. What, you thought I was gonna say pizza, weren't you? Anyways, I'm looking for a loadout so bad if you use it for more than 5 minutes, it could result in the collapse of your sanity. And to find this loadout, I'm gonna go through all 9 classes, naming what I think the worst loadout is, and ranking them from most usable to most torturous to use. And believe it or not, I've actually found a worse loadout than the one from my last video. Something truly evil. But before I get into the fun stuff, we gotta talk rules. I'll be sticking mostly to the rules I set in the original video. No omitting weapons for the sake of doing worse. I'm able to use every weapon in my loadout. So no, playing Battle Medic isn't a bad loadout because I could be using my medigun. The second rule is I have to use the loadout efficiently. I can't do gimmicks to purposefully hinder myself. And as for my new rule for this video, I will be taking random crits into effect. I know that normally random crits have no place in the discussion of TF2's weapon balance, but I gotta give every possible leg up for these bad loadouts to make sure that they are fully unoptimized. And with all that out of the way, let's jump into the least worst loadout. Truth be told, I don't think the Engineer can have a bad loadout. Nearly all of Engineer's weapons are useful, and at worst, a bit outclassed. With one exception, the Pomsen. Yeah, this is Engineer's only bad weapon. But I'll keep my reasoning brief because I promised to make an hour-long video on the Pomsen when I hit 20,000 subs. Just know for now that the slow projectile and low damage make it a very underwhelming item. Outside of the Pomsen, no matter what melee or secondary you choose, you are still going to have all of your supportive buildings to aid you. So no matter how you go about it, the Engineer just doesn't have a bad loadout. But if I really had to pick a worse loadout for Engineer, I would probably go with the Pomsen, Short Circuit, and Southern Hospitality. The Hospitality's lack of crits can really hurt when you lack solid damage output from the Pomsen and Short Circuit. But other than that, it's still completely usable. You may be wondering why I didn't choose something like the Rescue Ranger, Wrangler, and Gunslinger. And this is because while the Rescue Ranger doesn't synergize too well with the Gunslinger, it is still much more reliable than the Pomsen. And Wrangled Minis are stupid powerful too. Like I said, Engineer just doesn't really have a bad loadout. So I think Pomsen, Short Circuit, and Hospitality is as bad as you can get. The Medic is the second of the classes that I think don't have a bad loadout. Sure, you have some pretty underwhelming primary and melee options, but what separates the Medic E-boys from the Medic men is the Medigun. You have quite a bit of variety with the Mediguns, but they're all good. So no matter what you choose for your loadout, you still do what you're supposed to do. Heal. So the worst loadout I can think of is the Syringe Gun, Quick Fix, and Vitasaw. The Syringe Gun is the most underwhelming primary. Without the speed or health of the other needle guns or the healing capacities of the crossbow, the Syringe Gun is in this awkward middle ground with nothing that makes it good. The Quick Fix, like I've already said, is a good medigun, but it doesn't synergize well at all with the Vitasaw. See, the Vitasaw helps you retain Uber after death, but the Quick Fix charges so fast it doesn't really make a difference to make the 10 health sacrifice worth it. So yeah, this loadout is entirely usable still, but I think it's the worst one for Medic. Here's where things start to get interesting. Scout has some bad weapons for sure, but you can normally make them work due to their synergies with other weapons. Take the Sandman for instance. It's pretty trash most of the time, but when paired with the shortstop it helps in lining up mid-range shots easier, and I use these two together all the time. Therefore, instead of focusing on tossing a bunch of bad scout weapons into a loadout and calling it a day, I wanted to surgically choose which weapons function the worst with each other. If you've watched my Criticola video, you know that the Backscatter and Phantom War make the Cola pretty obsolete, due to all three weapons sharing the same exact upside. Therefore, my pick for Scout's worst loadout is the Phantom War, Criticola, and Backscatter. Now this loadout is still usable, which is why it's still so low down on the list, but it is definitely the least fun and effective way to play the class. I've ragged on the Backscatter a lot, and by a lot I mean pretty much every video I've released on my channel, but in all honesty, the Backscatter is just a slightly worse version of a great weapon. The Backscatter is like a mid-tier item, but when combined with the Cola that makes you take mini crits for the same upside, you start to struggle. Then combine this with the Phantom War, which deals less damage than the stock bat, even when it crits, and your sustain and damage output suffers greatly in battles. I mean seriously, this metal gun buy does less damage than a tube of wrapping paper. So you really only have 4 scattergun shots. If you run out, you better hope you get to reload before freaking dying. You may also be wondering why I haven't chosen the Candy Cane for this loadout, due to how badly it synergizes with the Criticola. And that's because while it doesn't synergize with the Cola, it does synergize well with the Backscatter. One-shotting a light class for an easy med pack is a viable strategy, and compared to the Phantom War, the Candy Cane is a much better damage dealer. All you gotta do is ignore the Cola. Again, using this loadout you aren't useless. You still have a reliable primary, and if all else fails you can still mark an enemy for death and run away. But with all that considered, you are still playing with a serious handicap when you use this loadout. It severely hinders your firepower, and all items in the set share the same exact upside as each other, canceling them all out. I think this is for sure Scout's worst loadout. On to the next class. Sniper marks a turning point in this video, because this is the last of the truly usable loadouts. Think of it like the tip of an iceberg. Past this point, you'll only be making your way down into the infinite abyss that is the depths of the ocean. So what is Sniper's worst loadout? Personally, I think it's the classic Darwin's Danger Shield and Tribalman's Shiv. Tribalman's Shiv? Tribalman's Shiv, ooh. The classic is a weapon that I just flat out hate using. Needing to wait for full charge to get a headshot just feels clunky, and during that time, you move so freaking slow. In fact, everything about this weapon is slow, so it's going in the loadout. The Darwin's Danger Shield is also a dumb item. Like, you already have Jarate to put out fires as well as instantly win any close range encounter, so why would you wear something that does the exact same thing for half the benefit? You really only need it if a pyro is relentlessly spamming scorch shots or attacking you directly, at which point just find a new sightline. Lastly in the loadout is the Shiv, which I believe is among the worst weapons in the game. The Shiv does 50% less damage in turn for a bleed effect on hit for 6 seconds. This means that the Shiv does more damage over time, but by the time you'd be making the most out of that bonus damage, you're already dead. This means that the Shiv's only practical purpose is tracking spies, which it fails horribly at. See, the spy only takes half of a debuff timer while cloaked, so the Shiv only bleeds cloaked spies for 3 seconds. Compare that to the Jarate affecting cloaked spies for 5 seconds, and yeah, once again the Shiv is outclassed and useless. So if you take all of these underwhelming weapons and put them together, you get a pretty stanky loadout. You take a long time to deal any substantial damage, and your self-defense is cripplingly low. Because even a random crit from the Shiv isn't enough to kill even a light class by itself, which leaves the enemy more than enough time to send you to the Shadow Realm.
No, bitch! Please don't send me to the Shadow Realm!
Heavy is a class people hardly experiment with. If you're not using the Tomislav, Sandwich/Banana, and Fist of Steel, you're wasting your time. Well, I never really like to play Heavy that way. I like to play what I call Movement Heavy, where I try to be a constant threat with all my weapon slots, and it's definitely my favorite way to play this class. Elitist Heavies would look at my loadout and think that it's the worst loadout for Heavy, and they'd be dead wrong. Because the worst Heavy loadout is so much worse than Movement Heavy. And the ironic part, all 3 weapons are part of the same set. Yes, I'm talking about the Hibernating Bear set, made up of the Brass Beast, Buffalo Steak Sandwich, and the Warrior Spirit. See, all the items in this set try to make Heavy a glass cannon type character, possessing immense strength at the cost of making yourself weaker. The Brass Beast gives you a damage boost, but it makes you much more slow and vulnerable. The Steak makes you faster and gives you many crits for 16 seconds, but it restricts you to your melee and gives you a damage vulnerability. The Warrior Spirit has the highest raw damage of any melee weapon, but it gives you a 30% damage vulnerability. See, if you use all these weapons together, you aren't just doubling down on items that make you weak, you are tripling down on it. All of these weapons have god-awful synergy with each other. The Steak and the Warrior Spirit sounds good on paper. Dealing 114 damage per melee swing sounds juicy. But good luck reaching the enemy with 2 damage vulnerabilities working against you. And the Brass Beast isn't necessarily a bad weapon, but without a reliable way to reduce incoming damage or defend yourself when out of position, all you're left with is items that make you more vulnerable. Now the what, you may be thinking? You foolish oaf, I've outsmarted you. Wouldn't the Gloves of Running Urgently or Eviction Notice be worse picks due to the health drain? And to that I say, no. See, the Grill and Eviction Notice pair poorly with the Steak, but they can help you make escapes at the very least. And so in this scenario, if you use the Steak as a droppable health pack, you have a usable loadout. The Warrior Spirit is a much worse pick due to the lack of defensive potential and pitiful offensive potential. So yeah, this loadout is garbage. Please don't use it. Pyro is such a diverse character. They have so many unlocks that completely change up how you play the class. You got jetpacks, flare guns, shotguns, flamethrowers, and a weapon that shoots molten fireballs that requires you to play them in a refreshing new way. It's hard to get bored of playing Pyro with all the cool combos and weapon synergies, which is part of the reason they're my most played class. So I decided to ruin that for myself by crafting the worst possible loadout for them. The Flog, Gas Passer, and Hot Hand is the worst Pyro loadout. Let me explain. You may think that the Gas Passer helps the Flog charge the oomph meter since the afterburn damage it deals helps charge it, right? Well, it's not really that simple. See, the Gas Passer takes a minute to charge up. You can shorten this timer by dealing damage, but how do you deal damage? With the Flog. With this loadout, your only damage dealing tool is the Flog. Because a Hot Hand is so bad, I don't even feel like I need to explain why. So you're essentially playing Pyro using only your primary with no air blast until you get to throw out an item that deals about as much damage as a ball of moist toilet paper. If you even get the charged up, you're still pretty vulnerable, but those rare moments where you get full crits are what makes this loadout bearable to use at times. So prepare yourself, because the final 3 loadouts never even give you a shred of satisfaction while using them. Well, here we are at the final 3, almost there. From here on out, the loadouts go from unusable to life-threatening. Using these loadouts for too long can cause irreversible mental damage, so if you're not strong-willed, I implore you to leave this video and never come back. Seriously, I've seen tamer stuff on Live Leak. It goes without saying that Spy relies on two core mechanics, invisibility and disguising. So what happens if you take both of those away? The Dead Ringer and the Your Eternal Reward combo. See, the Your Eternal Reward requires a full cloak meter to use a disguise, and the Dead Ringer requires a full cloak meter to feign. So this means as a spy, one of the weakest classes in a 1v1 scenario, you are undisguised and uncloaked for long periods of time. Good luck getting behind your enemies. If you add the Enforcer and Red Tape Recorder onto this, it only gets worse. See, the Enforcer's redeeming quality is the bonus damage while disguised. It's not much, but it's fine. However, with this loadout, you aren't able to take advantage of this because you lack the disguise needed to get the bonus, leaving you with a near straight downgrade. The Red Tape Recorder is just an all-around bad weapon on its own, so putting in this loadout is not doing you any favors. I want to try and make the most of this loadout though. See, we're all about optimism here on the What Show, so I'd like to turn this into a good thing. I want to propose a new meme playstyle. You've got Fat Scout, you got Battle Medic, but what if I were to introduce you to Shitty Scout? The new terrible playstyle to meme on your foes. Do us all a favor and spread the good word about this year's new horrible meme loadout. Or don't. You probably shouldn't, actually. I've been holding in something for a long time, and I think it's about gosh darn time that I address it. One of the most common questions on my original video was that my worst loadout consisting of the Base Jumper, Scottish Resistance, and Persian Persuader was wrong. Everyone said that the Sticky Jumper would be a worse substitute for the secondary due to it dealing no damage. And so it's finally time to admit that I am still right! You fools failed to see the full scope of the situation! See, the bonus ammo pool the Sticky Jumper helps make up for the Persian Persuader's downside, and the mobility it grants you helps close the distance between enemies. It's certainly not an optimal way to play Demo Man, but it's a lot better than the Scottish Resistance in this loadout. But why is that? See, a common misconception from my last video is that by saying these three weapons used together are bad, it means that all of them are bad individually. And that's the ironic thing. The only bad weapon out of these is the Base Jumper. The other two are actually very good at their intended use. The Scottish Resistance normally isn't my cup of tea to play with, but its defensive capabilities are hard to ignore. It's great at locking down choke points and spreading damage over a whole area, but struggles in scenarios where you need to use it in a direct battle. This means that the Scottish Resistance should not be used like a primary weapon, leaving that to the grenade launcher. And the Persian Persuader is personally my favorite sword to use after the Eyelander. The amount of charging you can achieve with it is insane due to the charge meter filling up through ammo packs and slicing enemies. In fact, killing someone with it lets you immediately charge afterwards, leading to some pretty insane chain kills. There's even some cool tech with infinite charging and other cool shenanigans. However, its ammo reduction means that the weapon is only a hindrance unless you're playing full Demo Night. The problem isn't that the Scottish Resistance and Persian Persuader are bad weapons, but instead it's the fact that they synergize terribly and are exact opposites. The Scottish Resistance isn't able to get use out of its traps with a heavily reduced ammo count, which not only affects your total ammo count, but also the amount you receive from ammo packs. You only receive 4 stickies from medium ammo packs and 2 from small ammo packs. 2 stickies! And without a shield, the Persian Persuader is rendered almost entirely useless. Its only benefit is the longer melee range, but what good is that if you're not able to charge or have resistances? With this loadout, you are a glass cannon without the cannon. You are defenseless against a cold breeze. Top this all off with the fact that you lack a primary weapon and replace it with a parachute that, in order to use, takes up a good chunk of your ammo and health and leaves you defenseless in the air. And yeah, I can see why I named this the worst loadout in my first video. However, I think I found a loadout that's even worse than this. Yes, this absolute crime against humanity, this self-inflicted torture of a loadout isn't even rock bottom. And it can get worse than this. A whole lot worse. Here we are at the bottom of the barrel, the new worst loadout in TF2. I could milk the suspense a little further, but I'll just cut to the chase. It's the rocket jumper, gunboats, and escape plan. I'm not gonna lie, I was kinda dumb when I made the first video and said that Soldier's worst loadout was exactly the same, except the melee was the disciplinary action. I just saw the damage penalty and assumed it was the worst. However, the whip has a stupid long melee range and helps support your team at the very least. The escape plan does none of those things and has a much harsher downside. The escape plan deals the same damage as stock, so it has a leg up on the whip there, but while you wield the pickaxe, it marks you for death, making you take mini crit damage. No amount of mobility in the world makes that trade-off worth it. With this loadout, your only source of damage makes you take extra damage while deployed from any source, from any range, and reduces your healing from medics by 90%, provided you find one that would even want to heal you with this loadout equipped. That's not to mention that with this loadout, your secondary slot is rendered completely obsolete due to the fact that the rocket jumper deals no self-damage. In fact, the only saving grace of this loadout would be the rocket jumper, but the mobility it grants just doesn't compare to the damage you deal, making you a glorified distraction for the enemy at best, like swatting a fly. Granted, you can deal random crits with the escape plan, but you lack the damage to get the chance to scale up enough to make an impact, and good luck reaching an enemy anyway with all the damage you take. I think there's a case to be made for the demo loadout being worse, but as for right now, I'm confident in calling the rocket jumper, gunboats, and escape plan the new worst loadout in TF2. So there you have it, the worst way to play TF2. Again, I highly recommend not using this loadout for the sake of your mental health, but to any of you out there who are particularly strong-willed, I'd like to issue a challenge. If any one of you can reach a godlike kill streak using this loadout on an official Valve server, send the raw footage to me and I can give you a prize and a shout out in my next video. The highest I ever got was 2, so I just want to see if a feat like this is even possible. Good luck to those of you who attempt the challenge, and to those of you sane people who don't, thanks for watching the video. Man, it was a pain to make, because as I'm talking right now, I have a case of COVID-19. I know I normally don't show my face in videos, but just so you guys can see what I look like, here's a photo. I'm still determined to get this video out, so I hoped it was at the very least an entertaining waste of time. Well, it's time to go back into hibernation, so see you next time.